Hey folks, good afternoon. I talked a whole bunch about biodiversity lately, and I'm sure not done. I've been listening to this podcast about open source seeds, and there are lots of ways to ensure that someone doesn't just grow a plant that you've bred and save that seed and then not pay you for more seeds. And one way to do that is to make a hybrid that if you grow the seed from it, it just won't grow the same as the parent plant. But another way to do it is to patent the seed. So I have up on my deck over here. Oh, I can't see them really. I have a whole bunch of Haskap plants up there, and most of those are patented. If I were to take a cutting from them to make another plant, that would be against the law. So that tends to reduce biodiversity because saving seed yourself, you're always choosing which seeds to save. And the seeds that you save will be different from the seeds that someone else might have chosen to save from that same plant. And so over time, you're growing a variety of plant that is uniquely yours. It's biodiverse. It's different than another plant might be. And if you have a lot of people doing that all over, then you have, in the end, like a lot of different plants that'll look different from each other, that'll behave differently from each other, even if you're starting with something similar in the first place. It's also true that if the plants that you're starting with have a different kind of like if you have a single plant, it's always going to be just like itself. But if you look at these two tomato plants next to each other, you can see they look very different. And so if I started with these two tomato plants, then what I saved from them would be able to be much more different than if I just started from one tomato plant that looked like this, or two clones of this one. So a plant will come up with changes in itself over time, mutations, or combinations of genes that are already there. And a plant will also, a group of plants that you're breeding from will also have a variety of traits in them, and they can have like a larger or a smaller variety of traits depending on how that group was selected. Oh, they're getting big. Look at that. So some plant breeding, people have been doing this thing recently, which is so cool, which is you just take like 10 different kinds of plants and you breed them all together for a while, and then you start to select out of that. And so then you can draw from all of those different varieties. Like you can draw different traits from them. Like maybe one will be like a really bright red tomato and another will have like this beautiful lacy leaf. I love these leaves compared to a normal tomato leaf here. And maybe that one will also have be more resistant to frost, or maybe a different one would be more resistant to like heat and would set fruit in the heat. So biodiversity, it means a lot of things, but mostly it means having more choices, more options. Whether those are options that are spatially distributed, like different people breeding different varieties all over, or whether that means more options within the same group. So as you can see, these are some tomato plants here, and I love biodiversity. One of the things that I really enjoy doing is testing different varieties against each other. Oh, those poor lost goslings. They were swimming for too long. There we go. So I have like this tomato back here I don't know if you can tell, on the right is much smaller than the one on the left. And that's because it is a dwarf variety. And the one in front here is called Silvery Fir Tree. And it has these leaves that are, I think, sometimes described as carrot-like. And over here, normal tomato leaves, standard leaves. And if we were to go up here, inside the greenhouse, we would find another kind of leaf altogether, which is called a potato leaf. Where's a potato leaf? Here we go. So here's a normal leaf again, much bigger. And here's a potato leaf, which is less ferny, it's less finely cut. They are next to each other. And actually, if we look over here, we have two standard or normal tomatoes next to each other. But this one is like kind of lacy and frilly. That one's less so. And there's a difference between them. I just really enjoy the look of that. You'll notice in here, I've pulled out all the lamb's quarters, most of the lamb's quarters. It was starting to kind of get all these spots on it, and I have plenty outside, and I laid it down as mulch on the ground where it'll rot. So I'm not going to water in here for a couple days, just to let those roots dry out and die. But as you can see, my tomatoes are actually doing really nicely in here. The ones in the middle are much bigger than the ones on the sides, because they were covered with the landscape, or the row cover. And the ones that I planted first, over there, are smaller than the ones that I planted second. Now that doesn't mean that much, because these varieties over here are, because it's different genetics, it's a different variety altogether. But I want to see, these ones here are doing like really, really well in the center. They're huge. Let's just check what kind of tomato is doing well. This is Native Sun, which is a yellow tomato. This is Siberian from Heritage Harvest Seeds. This is also Siberian from Heritage Harvest Seeds. Then these two on the end are not as big. Those are Martino's Roma. So that's interesting. It's interesting to see the difference between them. There's a little lettuce plant. Looking delicious. So the tomatoes that we were just looking at over here they're kind of bushy and self-supporting. They're determinate kinds. Sort of self-supporting. I will still put some sort of support in for them. Whereas the ones in the middle here and on the far side are indeterminate. They're going to want to climb. And over here are speaking of biodiversity, I don't know if you've ever grown peas. I don't have regular peas right now. But these peas, they're climbing tendrils that normally are spirally and wrap around things, have been bred to be almost like leafy and lacy like that, and you just eat them. They're just bred to eat those tendrils and put them in salads and look fancy. Oh, here we have a neat example of fasciation, which is where the stem gets kind of like wide and grows into like I don't know if you can see there. It's flat and wide. And it's grown this really weird, flat and wide bunch of flowers that isn't growing properly. I pick off that rotten one. That's something that happens to almost all plants. Fasciation. That's on a JD Special C-Tex is the name of that variety. One of the cool things about growing varieties of plants is that you get to name them. Like if you breed one. And people name them all sorts of things. It's like a poem. Oh, here comes the sun. I haven't been in the greenhouse in the sun for so long because it gets warm in here. So I try and come in the greenhouse when it's raining and out here when it's sunny. Another bit of biodiversity I wanted to talk about, and I'm just going to talk about it for a second because I don't have a lot. I need to get some work done. I can't just sit here chatting with you all day. But I wanted to talk about biodiversity and selection in terms of wild plants. So when we select, like say raspberries like this, or carrots or something, we usually are selecting for kind of the things that we like, but we're also selecting for uniformity. We select for things to be kind of similar to other things. So like most carrots, they have like reasonably similarly shaped roots. For a long time, they were mostly orange. And now the marketplace is starting to want colored carrots, so we're selecting for a couple colors, but similar flavors, similar looks. But wild plants don't have that kind of selection. And one of the things that I eat that's a wild plant is this lamb's quarters here. It's my favorite green. It's super tasty. And so because I finished eating the stuff in the greenhouse, I started eating the stuff out here. And I picked some of this lamb's quarters, and it's delicious. It tastes kind of like asparagus. And then I came over here and picked what looks like a really similar plant, lamb's quarters, but it's incredibly bitter. And you can see it has a different leaf shape too. It's got a longer, thinner leaf shape. And it just tastes disgusting. I can't put it in my, like, it tastes bad. So, lamb's quarters hasn't been selected to taste good. I happen to like most of the ways that it has tasted, but I hate the way that this one tastes. So what's important that I do is that I dig up, cut down, kill all of these lamb's quarters here before they breed with my lamb's quarters that I like, because I don't want any more of those seeds in my garden. If those were to take over, like if I were to only pick the ones that I liked and left the ones to go to seed that I didn't like, then over time, my garden would only be full of lamb's quarters that tasted terrible. And I would have no lamb's quarters to eat. And I would feel like, oh no, this is a terrible weed. I don't want it growing in my garden. This is upsetting. So, yeah, biodiversity in wild plants, they're not selected to taste good or to have qualities that we really like as eaters, as food people. So even like my spruce tips up there from the different trees, each tree will taste different, and some will taste sweeter and some will taste more bitter. So that's super interesting, right? Like if you're out picking, like foraging, you're gonna taste different flavors from plant to plant. If you have a little bit of room or a little bit of like memory storage, you can mark the plants that you like. You can, if it's a spruce tip tree, you can put it on your GPS on your phone, like on Google Maps. If it's a berry, you can dig up a little piece of the root and propagate it, or you can take those berries home and put them in a pot and try growing them. But you can figure out which varieties you like, and then if you ever feel like propagating that variety, you can name it after yourself. Chances are it's not named, unless you're in a park in Vancouver. So yeah, biodiversity. Things taste different. Also, things have different qualities. You can see here I planted my beans, and they're just coming up. That's a bean. You can see the little bean there that split open and put a root down and the leaves up. Another bean, row of beans. This type of bean here is called refugee. It's sort of like a pinto bean, like a dry bean. You can also eat it green. And then this bean over here is called cocoa, and it's a black bean. And you can see that it's coming up much more slowly than the refugee bean. Right? The refugee bean, like there's just so many in a row that have their leaves already out. And the cocoa bean, there's a couple up, one there. There's two up there. So this is another trait of plants, is how long it takes them to come up in the spring, how fast they start to grow in the beginning, and because I have kind of a short season here, that might be something that is important to me. We'll see how fast they grow and who out of my dry beans, whether any actually manage to get dry by the end of the year. If they do, then it's a good source of food, right? I'm trying to grow a bunch of my own calories for overwinter, and beans are a good calorie source. So that is also another exciting biodiversity thing that I'm paying attention to. Oh my goodness. Oh, okay, there's carrot. So much chamomile coming up that just looks like carrots and it's not. Or pineapple weed. I might have to replant all of this. Try and get my carrots. Well, there we are. You have a good afternoon. And I will talk to you again soon.